Today I'm going to read you a book called The Baker's Dozen, a St. Nicholas Tale. Today is the feast of St. Nicholas. The Baker's Dozen. In the Dutch colonial town, later known as Albany, New York, and here's Albany, I've been there lived a baker, Van Amsterdam, who was as honest as he could be. Each morning he checked and balanced his scales, and he took great care to give his customers exactly what they paid for, not more and not less. So here's Van Amsterdam balancing his scales. Van Amsterdam's shop was always busy because people trusted him and because he was a good baker as well. He never was the shop busier than in the days before December 6th, when the Dutch celebrate St. Nicholas Day. At that time of year, people flocked to the baker's shop to buy his fine St. Nicholas cookies made of gingerbread, iced in red and white. They looked just like St. Nicholas as the Dutch know him, tall and thin, with a high red bishop's cap and a long red bishop's cloak. So here he is making the cookies. One St. Nicholas Day morning, the baker was just ready for business when the door of his shop flew open. In walked an old woman wrapped in a long black shawl. "I have come for a dozen of your St. Nicholas cookies." Taking a tray, Van Amsterdam counted out 12 cookies. He started to wrap them when the woman reached out and stopped him. "I asked for a dozen. You have given me only 12. "Madam," said the baker, "everyone knows that a dozen is 12. "But I say a dozen is 13, said the woman. "Give me one more." So here's the woman and Van Amsterdam. Van Amsterdam was not a man to bear foolishness. "Madam, my customers get exactly what they pay for, not more and not less." "Then you may keep the cookies," the woman said. She turned to go, but stopped at the door. "Van Amsterdam, however honest you may be, your heart is small and your fist is tight. Fall again, mount again, learn how to count again." Then she was gone. So there she is admonishing Van Amsterdam. From that day, everything went wrong in Van Amsterdam's bakery. His bread rose too high or not at all. His pies were sour or too sweet. His cakes crumbled or were chewy. His cookies were burnt or doughy. His customers soon noticed the difference. Before long, most of them were going to other bakers. "That old woman has bewitched me," said the baker to himself. "Is this how my honesty is rewarded?" And there's all the people. A year passed. The baker grew poorer and poorer. Since he sold little, he baked little, and his shelves were nearly bare. His last few customers slipped away. Finally, on the day before St. Nicholas Day, not one customer came to Van Amsterdam's shop. At day's end, the baker sat alone, staring at his unsold St. Nicholas cookies. "I wish St. Nicholas could help me now," he said. And then he closed his shop and went sadly to bed. And there's a sad Van Amsterdam. That night, the baker had a dream. He was a boy again, one in a crowd of happy children. And there, in the midst of them all, was St. Nicholas himself. The bishop's white horse stood beside him. its baskets filled with gifts. Nicholas pulled out one gift after another and handed them to the children. But Van Amsterdam noticed something strange. No matter how many presents Nicholas passed out, there were always more to give. In fact, the more he took from the baskets, the more they seemed to hold. So here he is sleeping, and then here's St. Nicholas giving out the gifts to the children. Then Nicholas handed a gift to Van Amsterdam. It was one of the baker's own St. Nicholas cookies. Van Amsterdam looked up to thank him, but it was no longer St. Nicholas standing there. Smiling down at him was the old woman with the long black shawl. So here's Van Amsterdam with St. Nicholas, and here's the woman with the long black shawl. Van Amsterdam awoke with a start. Moonlight shone through the cracks around the shutters as he lay there thinking. I always give my customers exactly what they pay for, he said to himself. Not more and not less. But why not give more? So here he's having an idea. Why not give more? The next morning, St. Nicholas Day, the baker rose early. He mixed his gingerbread dough and rolled it out. He cut the shapes and baked them. He iced them in red and white to look just like St. Nicholas, and the cookies were as fine as any he had made. So we have several pictures. Here he is cooking and baking and making the cookies. Don't you want to have a cookie? Van Amsterdam had just finished when the door flew open. In walked the old woman with the long black shawl. I have come for a dozen of your St. Nicholas cookies. See all the St. Nicholas cookies in the back? Don't you want to eat one? With great excitement, Van Amsterdam counted out 12 cookies and one more. In this shop, he said, from now on, a dozen is 13. You have learned to count well, said the woman. You will surely be rewarded. She paid for the cookies and started out, but as the door swung shut, the baker's eyes seemed to play a trick on him. He thought he glimpsed the tail end of a long red cloak. So here's the old woman in the shawl buying the cookies, and she's going out the door, and notice at the bottom the piece of the red cloak. What do you think's going on? As the old woman foretold, Van Amsterdam was rewarded. When people heard he counted 13 as a dozen, he had more customers than ever. In fact, Van Amsterdam grew so wealthy that the other bakers in town began doing the same. From there, the practice spread to other towns, and at last through all the American colonies. And this, they say, is how 13 became the baker's dozen, a custom common for over a century. And so everybody is enjoying the fact that they get 13 cookies as a baker's dozen. And alive in some places to this day. So the custom is alive in some places where you get 13 for the price of 12. Did you like that story? Poppy did.